Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Becoming Anchored podcast. My name is Laura Deneen. I am one of your hosts. Today, we have the lovely Nicole Cruz on the show with us, and I'm super excited for today's content. If you are new to the Becoming Anchored podcast, we really are about two things on this show. So, first and foremost, Lauren and I talk quite frequently about some of the human experiences that we have. We certainly go through pain and suffering, and we share about some of our own mental health journeys on this show. And so we're certainly here to offer some of that vulnerability with you all. And secondly, we have the amazing privilege of sitting with clients on a daily basis, and we truly cherish that work. It is such a gift to me and my team. We just absolutely love working with clients. And so we talk about some of the nuggets of wisdom, I guess, if you will, that we've gleaned over the years. And so we're really excited to share that with you all. And yeah, this is not meant to be your therapy. So if you're local to the state of Tennessee, we would love to see you. If not, we encourage you to reach out to someone local to you. Without further ado, welcome, Nicole.
Thank you. So excited to be here.
Yeah, I have followed Nicole's content for a while, and I feel like I've done this with quite a few guests on the show at this point where I like cold email or cold message you on Instagram and I'm like, hey, will you come on the show? But yeah, I have followed Nicole for a long time, and I think I found your account through a mutual friend. But yeah, Nicole talks to parents a lot about supporting, them and raising kids to have a healthy relationship with food and their bodies. And so I can't think of a better expert on this topic. And so I'm super thankful to have you today.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm excited to dive in and talk about anything that might be helpful.
Yeah. So say you have a family that comes in to see you and they want to better understand how to support their child in their relationship with food. Where do you typically start?
So there's a few things that I consider to be kind of like foundational elements around food, and it really also depends on what the family is experiencing. So I get a lot of parents that come in and they're like, I have learned about intuitive eating, or I've recovered from my own eating disorder, and I just like don't want to screw it up with my kids. I just want to do it right. And so there's some of those people, and then other people come in and they're like, I'm aware I want to help my kid have a healthy relationship with food, but I'm really worried because, and I hear the typical things I hear about are, but it seems like they're just like obsessed with sweets and candy, and that's all they would ever eat if that's what I let them.
Mhm.
Or maybe they're worried that their child is like quote unquote overeating or eating too much and doesn't seem to have that stopping point with food and they're not listening to their body. Or maybe they're really concerned about the like quote unquote picky or selective eating and they're really worried about them not getting the nutrients that they need, or it's just so frustrating. Like, I just wish they would eat a meal, So sometimes people are just like, yeah, I just want to do this right for my child, or I'm just really concerned about their behaviors. So it kind of depends on what they're presenting with overall. But there are some foundational elements that I look at. So one of the biggest things I talk about is actually the language that we're using in our home, and that's like the language about food specifically. Are we labeling food with judgment? How are we talking to our child? Are we saying things like you've had enough, right? Or like we shouldn't have too much sugar, or things like that, or making comments about how they're eating, anything that actually might create some judgment about food or eating behaviors, or plant some seeds around guilt or shame for the way that they're eating or what they're eating. So language is a huge one that I always talk to parents about. Another thing that I see a lot is like parents overstepping a little bit. And I hate to use the word controlling, but because I say I hate to use the word controlling because parents are always doing the best with the information that they have, right? Like if they're trying to step in a bit with their child's eating, it's because they want them to eat well, to get the nutrients that they need, right? To grow and thrive, to feel good in their body, all of those things. But oftentimes parents are inserting themselves a little bit too much and not giving their child enough autonomy in the eating relationship. And that tends to cause the issues of like more selective eating, because then a child is like shut down and doesn't want to eat because their parents trying to make them eat, or the quote unquote overeating because a child feels like they're not allowed to eat as much as they do need. So then they're trying to eat even more food. And so that's a big one, is really teaching parents how they can have some boundaries with food. I highly do recommend that parents still act as like guides and leaders around food, right? Kids kids don't know how to prepare all of their own meals or anything like that. Like, we still need to have some structure around food to be a support to our kids, but we also have to give our kids autonomy to choose what they want to eat within that structure. So I know that was big, but those are kind of the key elements is like figuring out what the structure is, giving our kids autonomy within it, and then using that neutral language.
I love how succinct you are in explaining that, and that totally makes sense. And I'm fully on board with that. And yeah, I'm not a dietitian, but we do a lot of like the emotion coaching, boundary, collaborative work with dietitians in my line of work. And so I love everything that you're sharing. Yeah. And the language piece, I think, is so important. So, so important. And if we think about the development of our children and even like the development of the brain and how impactful language can be. We work with clients here, and I'm sure you've seen this in your clients as well, that are like 50, 60, 70, and still are working through some of their own, what we call developmental trauma around what was said to them, either about their food choices or their bodies when they were like 7 years old. Right. And so,
Absolutely.
what we know about trauma is like the past is present. And so, even if that happened like 50 years ago, it still is in their system, and they need the opportunity and space to like work through it. So I love what you highlighted about language. I'm curious, like, what are words that you discourage? So I know like the healthy, unhealthy, good, bad. Anything else that you really like see frequently in your office?
Yeah, for sure. I see a lot of things that parents are trying not to be too judgmental. So they know they're like, oh, we don't use the word junk or we don't use the word unhealthy or healthy food. Like we don't label food that way.
Mm,
But there's more subtle things where like we're trying to do like it a little bit better, but we're still kind of using judgment or things that make our children not necessarily trust their bodies or trust that they're allowed to eat what they need. And so some of the other things I see parents saying are things like, oh, this is a growing food. So like trying to be positive, but it's a growing food instead of like a
mm,
fun food. So like growing food, fun food, things like we should make better choices around food,
yeah,
or this is a
yeah.
sometimes food, or we shouldn't have it too much. And so they're using all of
Mm,
this kind of language that's trying to be better than just that like blatant, like, this is bad, you shouldn't have it.
right, right, right,
But it still is arbitrary, and that's what I always tell parents. I'm like, anything that's an arbitrary category, we don't want to use. Kids need concrete
right.
terms. So we want to label food with just what it is. Like call a fruit a fruit, call
Yeah,
a vegetable, call a grain, or a piece of bread a carbohydrate, like whatever it is, anything that's concrete. But we don't want to get into these categories, even if it's like a fun food. It's like, well, why do we have to even label it a fun food? Why can't strawberries be a fun food? Why is candy a fun
right,
food? Like
right,
it doesn't
right.
there's no actual
Yeah,
concrete logic to it, right? Or like
yeah,
these I don't
yeah.
know if you've seen those charts where I think who was it that tried to do it? Oh, when like Weight Watchers rebranded and all of that. And then they were coming
Mm.
out with their like kids program and they put together like red light, yellow, right? Cringy. Yes. Horrible.
Yeah, I'm like, "Oh."
No, I hear you, right? And they would put out these systems though, and I've seen them other places too, like the red light, yellow light, green light. And then you'll see something like peanut butter as a red light food. And it's like, how is that a red light food? Well, it's a red light food because it
Right,
has a lot of calories in it. What? It's like fat
yeah,
and protein and even some fiber, and it's a great food. Why are we labeling that as a red light food? And so that's what I mean by arbitrary. Where are we coming up with these categories of these foods?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and, like, I think not to be reductionistic or make light of someone's struggle if you or your child has struggled with disordered eating or an eating disorder. But, yeah, I mean, I agree, it's like, well, newsflash, we do need calories to live, so when did calories become this bad thing, right?
Right.
um, with the peanut butter example that you share. Like we need energy to keep our brains functioning and heart pumping through our arteries. And yeah, I mean, I'm with you there. And it is interesting because yeah, I think arbitrary or even ambiguous, or it can
Yeah.
fluctuate day to day if you
Mhm.
use like language like fun or sometimes food. And what I loved that you shared, just to pick this out of what you shared, but you talked about like external, like I think you were used the word, not trusting their bodies. And so what I hear in that is that if we use those words, we are essentially teaching kids to rely more so on their external cues versus their internal, like, hunger fullness cues, or even like what sounds good to me today, and being able to trust that. Like, I think we slowly start to chip away at internal trust, which is so much of our work with clients, whether they're like kids that have disordered eating or adults, of like rebuilding trust in my ability to make confident choices with food.
Absolutely. No, I think that's spot on, and that's exactly what it does, right? If we think about kids when they're first born, they cry because they're hungry and they need milk in
Right,
some form, right? They just
right.
know, and then they, like, pull away when they've had enough. They're like, "I'm done. I don't want any more of that," right? And so
Yeah,
they know, and even toddlers, when they get tired of, eating food, they start throwing it on the floor, or they'll, like, turn their head if you're trying to give them the spoon, they know that they don't
yeah,
wanna have any more, but we slowly start to chip away at that, and again, like you said, they start relying, right, on external reasons for eating or not eating instead of listening to their body cues, and if we're trying to teach them too much about what you should or shouldn't eat, now we're in our brains instead of listening to our bodies.
yeah, yeah. Well, and I have a little almost 2.5-year-old girl. And, I did my recovery 12, almost 13 years ago at this point, and it's been a really sweet adventure for me to watch her eat. And one thing that we've been making quite frequently in my home recently has been Oreo milkshakes. I love cookies and cream milkshakes. And so, anyway, we've been having them in the evenings with her. And my husband wasn't super familiar with the whole world of like food freedom and intuitive eating and ED recovery before he met me, like, oh, I guess almost 10 years ago now. But it's been really interesting to watch her eat her milkshake because, we'll pour some in and we still have some in the blender if she wants more. But like, she stops drinking her milkshake. She's had a great dinner with us, right? We eat together as a family, and then she'll stop. Like, she will leave some in her little like unicorn princess
Yep,
cup. And it's really fascinating to watch. And I think a lot of that is because she knows that food is available to her,
yep.
right? We have adequate food in our home. And I know that there are so many like blessings to be able to say that, but we have adequate food. Food is spontaneous. We eat with her. So there's all these reasons I think that lead to her being able to like stop eating the milkshake. And also conversely, if she wants to drink the milkshake or even have more, she can certainly do that. Right. So it's just interesting to like take note of that as a 2.5-year-old that like fully trusts her body.
Yeah, for sure. I always say, like, we're worried, like, oh my gosh, we give too much freedom. That means that they're just going to keep like eating and eating and eating. And actually, it's the
Totally.
opposite, right? It's like if you feel
Right.
safe enough that you have more food, you feel safe enough to stop when you've had enough because you know you're going to get that
Right.
food again
Right.
and
Right.
again. And I see this with my kids too. And I think it's really important to note that this is true for there can be interference in the feeding relationship. There can be
Right.
reasons that
Sure.
kids have a hard time stopping eating or whatnot, but that doesn't mean that they don't have the ability. They might just need some more support around it, and that doesn't mean that we need to control them. It means they might just need some more support with it in the like quote unquote right way. So, if you're
Mhm.
experiencing that with your child and you're like, "But not my kid, they would never stop." There's something going on, whether that's in the feeding relationship where they don't feel safe enough to be able to have the amount of food they need, or it could be something else. Maybe they are going through something emotional and they are using food as a comfort. Like there could be
Yeah.
something there, but that doesn't mean that we jump in and restrict them because it will only create and exacerbate that issue even
Right.
even bigger.
Right.
But I see this with my kids too, who my oldest one is now 12 and they still can regulate, right? And so they say that because
Yeah.
yes, we trust sometimes a baby can, but oh, now when they have access to more foods or, marketing or they get older, they can't. One of my kids had a team party the night before. And so yesterday he had brought home the donuts because his coach was like, you guys take them home. So for breakfast, I put out this leftover box of donuts. And one of my kids had like not even half of a donut. And he was just like, I don't want this anymore. And they were
Yeah.
just like, ew, I don't like that kind. Like there's no urgency, like I have to eat them all right now. Do they enjoy them? Do they get a little excited over donuts? Sure. They're like, yeah, donuts for breakfast today. That sounds great.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
they can totally regulate, right? And that's why I think it's really important that this is true, that like kids, even as they grow and develop, they can keep that intact if we support
Yeah.
them in a way that they can continue to listen to their body cues and know that a variety of foods are going to be available to them and those aren't bad foods that they're not allowed to have or anything like that. And if your child has
Mhm.
gotten out of balance like that, it's never too late to like help them get reconnected again. I see this all the time in my program where parents have 9-year-olds or 11-year-olds and they're like, "Oh my gosh, is it too late? Is it too late? Have we already messed up? Has it all gone sideways?" I'm like, "Absolutely not. We can start implementing now. Kids are so resilient. It might take a little bit of time for them to rebuild that
Yeah.
trust in those cues, but
Yeah.
absolutely possible."
I completely agree with all of this. And I love that we talk a lot about hope on the podcast, right? This is so hopeful, right? That it's never too late. And we're really big on hope at Becoming Anchored. And so I think this message that you're sharing is really hopeful. Do you find that it's hard for parents to receive some of these recommendations when you're like for their own selves or their own patterns or behaviors with food and body, like when you're sharing maybe the recommendations that you have for their child?
Yeah, I get a lot of parents that are like, "Okay, part of me feels like that is right or like that does feel like the right thing,
Hmm.
but like it also feels so counterintuitive. Like it doesn't feel right to just let my kid not eat or eat more bread or whatever if they haven't had their vegetables or, like it does feel counterintuitive to a lot of parents. And I work with such amazing parents and families too that a lot of them are like, I get it, and I know that's what I should be doing, but I am just so reactive when I see my kid doing that. Like, I know it's my stuff, and I have such a hard time even though, like, I know what I'm supposed to be doing, it still feels really hard to allow it to happen because they
Yeah.
feel kind of
Yeah.
triggered by it. So, some of it is the logical part they have a hard time wrapping their head around, or they just haven't had that experience with their child where they trust their child, and so they feel like, "Oh,
Yeah.
no, I can't see that happening with my kid." Or they know, like, "Yeah, this is what I should be doing," but it just feels really hard to trust the process and to stay consistent with it when they see their child maybe eating in a way that feels a little bit out of balance or like they should be doing more to help them eat well or to get
Yeah.
that nutrition.
Yeah. Yeah. And then it begs the question of like, okay, for parent, where did this belief system come from? Right. Typically there's like generational beliefs passed down if the parent hasn't worked on, or maybe their parent or grandparent had a problematic relationship with food or their body, or diet culture as a whole, our world as a whole, social
Right.
media, right? There's like so many different influences, I think, around like food itself that can make it difficult, I would imagine, in your shoes to receive them, to give the recommendation. I
Yeah.
mean, I know that you still give it, but to be on the receiving end of that, I can imagine it would almost feel like a little bit shocking. I know for clients that we work with here, that's something that they will share with me of like, I had no idea that my child needed this much food or this variety of food, or there's like guilt and shame that oftentimes pops up if we're working with parents around like, oh my gosh, I've been way underfeeding my child, not intentionally. There's a grief that I think is there too. So all of those reactions, if you're listening to the show today, I think are a part of the process and completely normal.
Totally. And I think this too, like you were just saying, right? It's part of our culture too, and the way that we even treat parents and parenting in general. Like we carry so
Mm,
much weight around doing the whole parenting thing right. And like if your child's behaving this
yeah,
way, you're not doing a good job raising them. Or right, like we feel so responsible, and that's true when it comes to food too, that we feel this responsibility to get our kid to eat well and to not be too big or to not eat too much or to not have too much sugar. It's like we carry this, no pun intended, this weight around that we're supposed
yeah,
to do that. And I have parents that feel so embarrassed or ashamed if they go to the park date with their friends and their kid is the one that's like eating more and more chips and the other kids are off playing and they're like, "Oh my gosh, like why is my kid the one that wants more chips and I feel irresponsible or maybe I should cut them off like the other parent did," because another parent might say
yeah,
like, "No more chips for you." And they're like, "Oh my gosh, I just let my kid eat more chips. Is that like that?"
yeah,
And so there's just so much judgment and shame in parenting in general. And then you put
yeah,
like
yeah,
food and body size and nutrition, which is so we're so hyper about in our culture that it's just like extra, like just the layers that
yeah,
parents feel around food.
yeah. Yeah, I would say even like, and I've used the word right a few times on today's episode, but like there's a perfectionistic kind of
Mhm.
pressure, I guess, if you will, to, yeah, to parent perfectly. And the reality is we are going to mess up. And when we can have acceptance around that, I think there's a lot of beauty in that.
Yeah.
Now, the secondary piece here, I think, too, is like the repair, right? So I love these parents that you're sharing about, and we've experienced this in my practice as well, where there's a humility to know when and how to ask for help. and to maybe see red flag behaviors in your child, and to know that maybe you don't have the skills that are needed to support them. So how brave and courageous it is for parents to like let an outsider in
Yeah.
to their like child's feeding journey, and to like want the best for their child, right? Even when they have messed up, even when they have gotten it wrong or said unhelpful things or used unhelpful language about food itself.
Yes, I fully agree, and that's it, right? It's like parents often say that to me, like, "I just wanna do it right." Like, there's no perfect right way, and you're gonna have
Yeah.
different
Yeah.
situations and scenarios that come up, and that's
Right.
okay, right? But we do wanna try to create an overall environment and culture where our kids feel trusted, and feel
Yeah.
safe with
Yeah.
food, and to your point too, right, to, like, reach out for help. I always say, like, my whole goal in working with parents is, yes, I give you a lot of tools and strategies and scripts and like language and all of these things, right? I give you all of those tools. But really, at the end of the day, my goal is to help you start trusting yourself again with how to parent around
Right.
food. Because it's not like,
Right.
oh, I need the perfect formula for every situation. It's just, how do I release some of this so that I feel like I'm not charged around every feeding situation and that I can make decisions that aren't based on trying to control my kid or me being triggered, right? So it's like, how can I
Yeah.
just make
Yeah.
these calm decisions? Because sometimes it is okay to say, no, we're not getting the chips out right now. Like it is
Yeah.
absolutely okay to do those things, but we don't want it to come from a place where, oh my gosh, I'm scared that my child is only eating all junk and they're gonna gain weight or right. It's like all of those things. We have to be able to do our own work to settle some of that stuff down so that we can make conscious decisions around food.
Right. Right. Or even like regulated ones,
Yeah.
right? Like responsive. And then we are emotional as human beings, right? But where we're leading with like wise mind of like, okay, this is what I know to be true about food. This is my emotion. So what do I do? That's a beautiful skill too that we will teach parents in our practice. And I love what you shared too, is like, yeah, I mean, we have to work on our own relationship to food and body. And if any of you are listening, I would encourage anyone to do that, whether they've had a history of an eating disorder or not. My husband doesn't have a history of an eating disorder or disordered eating. And there were some food rules in
Yeah.
his home growing up, or food rigidity. And so he has been able to work on some of that. And yeah, I think for anyone, working on our relationship to food in our bodies can be really fruitful and helpful.
Totally. I think it's so true. It just our culture, most of us have something there with food. I mean, yeah, some people
Yeah.
never, I don't know, never feel like their relationship was with food was really interfered with. But I find a lot of people, even like in my family and stuff that are like would never be diagnosed or I would consider to have like disordered eating or an eating disorder,
Right.
they still notice like, "Oh, I do that with food. I didn't
Yeah.
realize," like
Yeah.
just these little behaviors from maybe something that was said in their home or the way that the meal was presented or if they had comments always made about like, "Ah, you should take a few more bites," or whatever it might be. They don't realize, or maybe there was a little bit of a scarcity feeling around food, so they find like, "Oh, I always eat really fast because I was worried my brothers and sisters would get more." Like, just little things that maybe didn't, totally interfere and create an eating disorder, but they still are like, "Oh, yeah, those behaviors with food, they're coming from somewhere else."
Right.
There's some other drive for the way that I'm eating.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Nicole, you're just a wealth of knowledge. Thank you so much for everything you've shared today. I know that it will be a gift to our listeners. So I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so glad you reached out and that we got to do this.
Of course. Yeah. So, you know that we close with an affirmation and homework. Would you like to, maybe provide the parents listening or anyone listening with an affirmation or even an encouragement in this process?
Yeah. I mean, one of the biggest things that I can say, right, is to trust that you're never doing it wrong and that wherever you're at is exactly where you're supposed to be right now. And it's also never too late to take a look at the way that you're parenting around food and to make some changes if it feels like that would be more in alignment with what you really want for your child. And we can only do that though if we're not judging or beating ourselves up or anything. So just
Yeah.
knowing like you were doing the best that you could with the information that you had at the moment with however you were raised with food,
Mm.
and it's okay to take a look at it now or to seek out support if you feel like you need a bit more help around it.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's both an affirmation and homework, right? Like resisting the urge to judge, offering compassion to yourself, reaching out for encouragement, to reach out for support if you need it. Well, how can our listeners find you?
Yeah, I think one of the best places is probably on Instagram. I'm there at Nicole Cruz RD. I'm pretty active there. And also, I have resources that you can access. I do some regular trainings and I have some free resources too. Like one of my biggest ones is the 5 keys to raise an intuitive eater. So if you go to my Instagram and you DM me the word keys, I will send it to you and you can download that.
That's amazing. Wow, I love it. I might do that myself.
Will do. Please do.
Yeah, I love it. Well, thank you so much, Nicole, for your time. And thank you to our listeners for being here today on the Becoming Anchored podcast. We will see you all next time. Take good care. Bye.